You are now listening to the NerdWords podcast, brought to you by UtilityMuffinLabs.com. If you know your party's extension, please dial it now. Press 1 for customer service. Press 2 for podcasts. Press 3 to check on an order. Press 4 to eat at Manhattan.
Welcome to another episode of NerdWords. I am your stumbling host, Nate.
And I'm Bob.
And today we are joined by Collin.
Hello.
And we are joined by Rachel.
Hello.
And we are here to talk about our Gen Con. All right. So we're here to get a bunch of different perspectives, obviously, because everybody had a different experience. And Bob and I had sort of a conjoined meetup experience with our podcast listeners. And Collin had the unforgiving and daunting task of having to run a LARP for a large quantity of people. And Rachel was with me and got to experience a PTSD-inducing bridge crawl.
Oh, yeah, we got stories. Yeah, so Nate and I were pretty much hanging out the whole time with the exception of a few events. But yeah, we endured some pretty scary things.
So, Bob, let's get started with you. You actually had like the most complicated little like travel accommodations and like things seem to be kind of in the air. So explain to us your trip to Gen Con, because we're all native now. We didn't have to go anywhere. You did. So let's hear about that.
So in classic Gen Con fashion, you have the best of intentions, you plan, you reserve your hotel, everything's good, people get in, people pitch in, they're going to go. And we had one of our Patreon fans decide they're going to fly in from Oakland O'Hare and then drive to Indiana with us.
Is that easier?
And he's a great guy, and he's like, you know what? I'm just going to get a car rental. That'll be that. That way, nobody has to worry about driving. Rental's easier. We'll all go, and that's that. Enough room. All right. And I was like, we're big guys. Like it's me, Pay, and Mike, and Dom is about average. And so we're like, don't put us in anything like small or nothing. I mean, but decent. Do you?
It's like four defensive linemen in a compact car, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So Mike apparently lands, and we're looking at the time, and we're like, oh, man, it's probably a problem with his luggage or whatever. And he texts me, and it was basically, these motherfuckers don't have my rental. And I was like, what? He's like, but then he immediately, like, I guess, like, he could read my mind, right? Used to talking online. And he goes, yeah, I'm on it. This motherfucker going to give me something. And I was like, all right. He shows up about 30 minutes later, and he's like, I got this Corolla. And I'm like, well, you fit in it, right? You could drive it. He goes, yeah, I've dealt with 30% less. He was very specific about how much less space of a car he's driven. I was like, all right, I guess. And I was like, look, we could just take the SUV. Like, that's here. It's there. We'll be fine. He's like, nah, I rented it. It's here. All right, we'll do that. Well, my joy is we have a fun time, talking our heads off. We're all excited, how it is free leave. And then we wake up and go. And it was the first year we literally just like, everybody was up, everybody was showered, everybody was out in order on time. And would be the last time we were on time for anything, I might add. And we get in this Corolla. Now I'm looking at it. Mike gets in it. It's all right. I get in it. It's a little lower. Pate gets in it. Are we on the ground? Dom gets in it, and it's like cosmic. It was like somehow Dom counterbalanced it. Maybe it was just even dispersed at that point. We back out, and I could feel every fucking bump we were driving on, like without a doubt. And there was times like we were driving on the road, and he would turn. It's a little uneven. You'd hear it keeps going. And Mike's like, "Shit, we better be careful." And I was like, "Careful? Is it gonna make it? Like we should probably get out and pick it up. That would be easier. Make it good." So we get to where we're going, and it's like get to the meetup. And at first, it hit me as we hit Indiana. I'm like, shit, what time is it? Like, what? We got the meetup. Is it 2:00? What the fuck? Why was I thinking blah, blah, blah? They're like going, nah, man, you're fine. It's like a half hour. You're good. Mm-hmm. And I was like, holy shit, why is it that close,
Right.
Get out. We find the signs beautifully put out. You guys picked an amazing spot. And I love that tattoo place. It's a great ambiance. It's like a good place to hang out and get a tattoo or just to hang out. It's like an inviting joint. And when we get in, it was just like a relaxation. Oh, thank God we're here. Everything's on time. Yeah. Everything looks amazing. And then we got to meet everybody. However, while we're in this glorious moment, 'cause I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute, I'm looking at Nick, and he's sitting far off away from everybody. I'm like, not only is that not Nick, that's like something's wrong behavior.
Right.
And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? All right. I walk over there and I'm like, hey man, you doing all right? Can I get you something to drink? Are you more tired than usual? And he's like, he just looks at me real arrogantly, I was like, Nick, quit fucking around, man. What's wrong? And he's like, oh, they canceled our hotel.
Oh shit.
Like,
I didn't know that.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
And I was like, so let me get this straight. We had a cancellation for a rental. We had a cancellation for a hotel. And I was just like ice in the veins, as cool as could be. I'm like, all right, man, do what you can, find it.
How does that even happen? How do they cancel your hotel?
Nick found out that apparently they double booked.
I want to just express real quick. Bob literally shrugged his shoulders and put his hands up, like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's crazy. So they double booked, and just someone checked in before you got there, and then they're like, "Well, the Coke, the ice machine room is open." Like, is that what could have happened?
More or less, they just basically told Nick to pound sand. I mean, he did it months out, so it's like they just didn't honor it.
Wow.
And it was like, well, what the hell? So apparently he got on the horn, and we found a place that was actually an upgrade. It was a little farther out, like by maybe 5 minutes, but it was like you had a pool, ice cold rooms, decent space, the whole nine.
Well, worst case scenario, y'all have been camping on our floor and our couch, so
yeah. I mean, that's.
I didn't use those.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to pay you guys for showers, is what I was going to do. we were just sleep in the Corolla and suffer, and I'd be like, "Can we use your shower? Here you go."
To be fair, our place is small enough though that if all of you had stayed here, it would have still been like sardines or sausages.
Right. You would have still gotten the Gen Con experience.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
No escape.
You're good. I was adjusting for Collin, but you're good. I could still hear you. I just want to hear you well.
No worries.
But I could tell you from my perspective, the meetup was a joy, and I know it was a lot to do in a setup, and obviously getting it in there. So I appreciate you both Rachel and Nate, for that, because it made it easier. Like, it was stress free.
Yeah.
To come in and just start engaging people and talking, and that was one of the most rewarding experience for me at Gen Con was to meet our listeners, rather than just talk to them or digitally have to talk to them.
Well, we got there, and like the one thing that I was like, because I thought you guys were coming up on Wednesday, right? So I was like, oh, everybody's going to be here on Wednesday. We'll go get a meal. We'll hang out. We'll do like the pre-Gen Con thing where we get shitty drunk and we have a great time.
Which is happening next year, by the way.
Right. And then. Who did I think I heard from Chris, because Chris was kind of like left, DJ was left, like, I guess he was in charge of planning, like, event-wise. And he's like, oh, yeah, no, they're coming up tomorrow. And I was like, oh, shit, okay, well, whatever. And then we go out and we met DJ, and we have a listener that lives up here in Indy, and his name is Isaac, and he's awesome. But, we all met up. We went and got some... I won't name the restaurant, but it was average to middling Mexican food. We got some tacos.
Yeah.
And it was but the benefit of it wasn't slam packed with people, right? And actually, Bob, you and I ate there before, like a number of years ago. It was like a spot we were walking back from our hotel, and you were like, "Oh, there's a Mexican place. Let's go check that out." And there was nobody in there.
I know it.
Right?
And there's still nobody in there, and the reason why is because the food is shit. It's not, and it's like if it was shit and it was really inexpensive, it'd be fine. They would have more customers, but it's like average, mediocre, kind of shitty Mexican, and it's still like $15 a plate. Mm-hmm. So,
wow, I remember we sat. I want to say we sat at the bar because I remember you and I were making Dust Till Dawn references as the Frog Brothers because they had vision. Yes, I do remember the joint.
Yeah, so we hung out in there. We had the most stereotypical gamer conversation that has ever been had, wherein two grown men argued the virtues of an old game system versus a new game system. And,
I almost live tweeted how ridiculous it was, but then I remembered that I'm friends and followers of both Isaac and DJ on Twitter, and I know I was talking about their asses, so I didn't.
So, we got some food, we left, and, by that time, like, honestly, it was like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and we were just like two old people that had been up since 6 o'clock in the morning, and we were like, fuck it.
Yeah, because we had both worked that day.
Right.
Yeah, I had like a big presentation like on Wednesday at work that went until 4, and then I like rushed home to grab Nate. Then we rushed to the I had to stop by a friend's house and pick up something. We had to go by the store and grab something. Oh, we had to buy the muffins.
Yeah.
That's the other thing is like we promised people muffins, and like we went everywhere trying to find adequate muffins, and we couldn't find adequate muffins. We've either terrible prepackaged muffins in a box or like really amazingly good Costco muffins. And like we love you guys, and we were spending Patreon, funds to furnish the meetup and everything. But these Costco muffins are like top shelf muffins, and both Nate and I were like, it doesn't really fit the theme of being consistently adequate.
It's actually kind of hard to find adequate muffins.
Yeah, so we ran to Meijer and got muffins, and then we had to drop off everything and set up at the tattoo place. And so then by the time we sat down for dinner, I think he and I were both spent. Like I was ready for a little nappy nap by Wednesday evening.
So Thursday, it occurs to me, I'm like, what fucking time is it? And we were like, let's go to the tattoo shop and set up, get everything going. So we were there by 1 o'clock, and I'm like,
well,
shit.
not only that, but we were at Gen Con at like probably 8:45 because we had parked and we were there by 8:45 because we knew we had to walk. And Nate really wanted to make sure that he got a copy of V5 to give away to a listener at the meetup. And so we were there when the doors opened, which was a first time for you.
So my ass was like, oh man, I hope this Gen Con isn't like every other Gen Con I go to where there's a new book that comes out and they bring 5 and you're fucked and you don't get it, right? Because how often does that shit happen?
Like all the time.
Right, it happens all the time. So I'm like, we need to be there front and center Thursday morning. I got to get my book. And I was like, I want to get this out of the way. I want to get the book that we're giving away. I want to make sure I can get it because I hate making promises and not being able to keep them. When I say like, we're going to give this away, I want to make sure we're giving it away. And so I was like, we're sitting at the tattoo shop and I'm like, oh shit, like, I hope fucking Bob gets here on time. Because they're like trying to do the math. Like, okay, it takes this long to drive there. It takes this. They're going to want to get to their hotel room. I'm like,
they're going to lose an hour.
Right. So, but I was like, oh, they'll figure it out or they won't, whatever. We're here for 2 hours. If Bob walks in like Elvis, like, awesome, but we weren't
Not
sure.
awesome. I would have hated that. So
Right.
Glad it didn't happen that way.
So we have the meetup, and the meetup was, again, it was like kind of indescribably awesome, right? We get to meet all these people that are not just like interested in our podcast, but also interested in the thing that we talk about. So we get to have a lot of really cool conversations and, just meet people. Some people we'd talked to before online, other people just like for the very first time, like get to make new friends. So yeah, you were talking about how Pei is kind of like freaking out because you don't have a hotel room.
Well, I mean, that was like, honestly, that was it. Because, I mean, he found the new spot. And when you think about it, but what you don't know is driving in the car, like it was hot out, right? We had stopped at the typical, right? Traditional is don't eat, just leave on time. And the first pit stop, you'll have like breakfast, wherever that is. Right. Well, our old traditional, I forget, like Old Country. Well, I don't know. The place with all the rocking chairs out front, Cracker Barrel, that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we went there, and it was quick. But the funny part is, this is the first time we're getting to know Mike.
Right.
And Mike's like my long-lost blood relative brother by both size and mentality. Like, you have me and him in the car. He's humming and singing songs, when he's just driving along. I'm chiming in. We're just being loud, just how it is. And Pei's a heckler, so he just keeps it going. But when we get to this Crate and Barrel, we're sitting down, and
Crate and Barrel
is a different place that I've never.
I think probably Collin's registered for that for his wedding.
I might be.
So we're in Cracker Barrel eating, and I'm just watching this lady come over to the table. She's a small thing, waif of a thing, and she's like, "Howdy, y'all. What you gonna be having?" And I look over, and Mike's like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, Mike, we're like down south." He goes, "We ain't that far south."
You're not so far south at all. You're just in fucking Indiana.
Right. I mean, it's like a Hoosier thing. I don't know. It was explained to me once, but I don't understand. He's like, all right, then whatever. Here's my breakfast order. We get it in. She comes out delivering it, and it looked like linemen had ordered at the table. Because the sampler I had was small enough and accurate enough for one person, but for some reason their presentation required 3 plates. Right? And I'm like, this is weird.
That's their way.
It's just like a lot of protein, whatever, and then you're done. Well, something occurs, and I still am not 100% clear on what it was, but I know I watched Nick and Mike, who are sitting opposite of me, just stare straight ahead and get real focused on what was going on. And I'm like, what the hell? And he's like, you wouldn't understand. There was a show. There was a whole show you missed. Like, what do you mean? He goes, there was this kid we saw take off running whose head was so big that it took him careening towards a chair. Like he was going to collide with a chair. And these hecklers both watched. Like they were held hostage. They couldn't say stop. They couldn't wave the kid off. They were like, he's going to hit the chair. They just had to watch it happen. And why it was so funny is because the way they said it, there was like guilt in the voice. You know what I mean? Like weird. Like they're held hostage. They would have stopped it if they could. This poor kid with a big old head hadn't grown into yet is just going to make it happen. And that was the most exciting thing in the trip. But I'm highlighting that because sleep debt is what I heard. We'd all collectively been up heckling too much, having too much fun the night before. We had 2 hours sleep at that point. Woke up and drove. So I'm now seeing it, right? This is all signs of adults trying to go to sleep and fighting it. Well, by the time we get to Collin's LARP, we've been mindlessly walking around. Right. We made it through the meetup, which is the important thing for me on that point. And I'm like, oh, flag, good, we're done. I go to Wilco, get my stuff, and we did a pot afterward or whatever, and then we're done. And as I go to the LARP, I'm realizing that I am so fucking hot and so sweaty just walking around that all I want to do is to drink a fire hydrant. That's all. Just one fire hydrant. And then, Colin's like, hey, you here yet? Are you here? He's like, yeah, I'm around. I get there. I walk past the room because I see the jugs of water, like angels dropping ice in buckets, water being poured in, and I turn into a baby hippo. I'm over there down in water, throwing it over my head, like trying, I got to be in front of people. I'm looking like I'm half dead from it. And I'm like, okay, wake up. I go to the bathroom and I'm wiping myself down from excess water and sweat, and I'm good, and I'm there, and I'm fine. And I'm like, smart thing I did, had a deodorant in my pocket. Right?
Oh, that's what separates you from Nate all weekend.
Yeah, I may have 3 out of the 4 days forgot about.
He was
deodorant.
just so excited and anxious to get out of the house, he forgot to put on deodorant almost every single day.
Yeah. I don't know how that fell out of my normal habits of things that I do, but
oh, you turned into a baby hippo, Bob. That's too funny. I will say that is like one thing that consistently, no matter what hotel you went to for a game, whether you were in the convention hall or you were in like a nearby, boardroom or a hotel or whatever, they had water everywhere. So if you had a water bottle or you had a cup, you could always have free water. And I was like really impressed. I'm like, that's what, you could have free water or you could pay like $1.50 for a Mountain Dew. A lot of people are still going to go try to find that Mountain Dew, but there's water right here for me. So.
Oh no, there's water.
They kept the refills on point this year.
Yeah, they were all over it. So Collin, tell us about your LARP. Like, what was it like? The first, was Thursday really stressful for you? Were you really busy? What was going on with that? What's it like to run a LARP?
I did not get to go to the con on Thursday because, as it turned out, there were a couple of profiles and stuff that weren't completely done. Some that it's sort of a mixed thing that kind of fell through. And
like
so
character profiles.
Yeah, character profiles for people that I were pretty sure was going to show up. So I ended up missing the first day at the dealer hall, just chilling out in the hotel room, like just banging out profile after profile after profile, being like, all right, these have to be done. There was just no way that I was going to sit down and be like, all right, here's your entire character story. Just read it. After that, it was first night, always kind of hard. A lot of logistics. Despite the fact that it's usually in the same place every single year, we somehow always forget where it is. We always get lost. We end up in the wrong place. This time we showed up and they didn't even have the room split off. It's supposed to be split off. Instead, they've only got it like vaguely split off with a line of chairs.
We noticed that when we showed up because like one side of it was a Dresden Files LARP or something, and the other side was Vampire. And it's not like, there's some overlap potentially in the costuming there, so we weren't sure where to go.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, no, it was, their LARP was from like 7 to 1, and ours was from 5 to 11, so when we got there, we were like, oh man, this is great, we've got like this gigantic area this time, this is awesome, and they showed up and like, actually, one side of this is ours.
Right.
But you have the side that has the only working air conditioner. I was like, ooh, all right, so how are we going to handle this? We ended up doing it where we've got the wall half built between the rooms so we can get some airflow going on between those guys, and we just had a lot of cross shouting. I guess is what happened. Every now and then I'd hear something that didn't make any sense. Oh, right, that's from the Dresden LARP. That's why it doesn't make sense.
Right.
I do like the showmanship you presented at the beginning, and I was a little disappointed afterward though, because you have this ability to get everyone's attention. It's like, hello, everyone. Welcome to San Francisco Shattered. I'm your host, Collin, and today we're gonna. And you get that thing, and it's like, I'm watching TV with Collin. All right, let's check it out. And the moment you stop, you're like, okay, game. And it's like, well, that didn't make any sense. Don't live, man.
Wait, now I have to work and play a character? No friend.
Exactly.
Next time I'll just keep going. First night, I narrate you through all your actions. Everyone just stands around. I'll be like, all right, well, this is San Francisco Shattered. First night, I'm going to tell you what your characters have done. Tomorrow night we'll play.
Right.
And I don't exactly know who you gave to Rachel, but when I tell you something, there's 2 people I now know in life, I make sure not to give them 10 characters on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of being just direct.
Oh, Bob,
Bob,
you got a little robot-y there. Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, I said there's characters that you just don't give people on a rating 1 to 10 because they're going to sell it to the hilt. And Rachel had one of them because I thought there was going to be a fight at a table. I'm sitting on the side in my character. We'll put that to the side for a minute. And I'm looking over as Rachel's dressed up. She's got her costuming on. And I'm like, man, I wonder who she's playing. And she's walking intensely, right? She's like walking through people, back and forth, looking around, got a bounce to her step, like something about to happen. And then I just see her lean into somebody and just start yelling at him. And I'm like, whoa. That's exactly what should happen. When that happens and those volumes raise and it's quiet and people had the look of panic on their face, I wasn't ready for that. Like, I was like, someone stepped wrong, man. I'm like sitting there immediately like going, man, she's trained.
Right.
This is going to happen. And I was like, is she role-playing right now? Where's Nate? I went through this
Where's Nate?
process. Right, like somebody needs
Nate,
to
you better
grab
go
her.
get your bitch.
You need to grab her because there's about to be some flying going on. I don't know what's up. And then when it was explained, it's like, oh, no, that's your character. It's like, yeah, y'all need to, like, step it up then. Causing sideline heart attacks.
Well,
it was good roleplay.
I know, like for us, the first night, so we were like, the meetup's over. We gotta get to the LARP because we gotta be there on time. And my fatal error as a gamer, as a podcaster, was I was really struck by the fact that we spent money on beer. And I was like, I can't let this beer go to waste. Like, I'm not a drinker, right? Everybody that knows me knows, like, Nate's like a twice-a-year drinker, maybe, birthdays, holidays. It's just, I don't really dig it, whatever. But the fact that I spent money on beer, I was like, well, I can't let it go to waste. And we sit down to record this podcast.
Which first of all, I got to say, I think that I'm going to call bullshit because you let all those bags of chips and cookies go to waste. I don't know. You let every bottle of water go to waste.
Yeah, but
you let all those muffins go to waste.
Beer's different, right?
And what you don't know is the way Nate brought the beer to the recording. Like, I'm dead thirsty from talking because we met Ives and Michael, and they came up from Belgium, which is awesome. And as we're talking, Rachel excuses everybody because we got to do this thing. And
did she excuse everybody?
Yes, excuse. I'm going to say that politely. And that's
she was
I
like,
thought it was awesome. Get the fuck out.
You don't have to. You can't stay here, but you don't have to go home. Get the fuck out.
But then Nate walks over and he's like, going, "Here, man, you look thirsty." And he hands me a Corona. And I was like, "Well, it's open, and I am thirsty." Remember my water story? I got to your LARP thirsty.
Yeah.
I'm chugging at this Corona. And I go to the fridge to grab a bottle of water. Nate has like 3 beers with him.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure they got finished.
He didn't want to have to get up. And I'm like, oh, maybe they're for like, the Jackalope people who were there. And, we're about to do the podcast with. Maybe not. He gets over there. Nate's like, that's a coaster for that one, coaster for that one. And I'll just open this one now and hang on to it. And I was like, oh, we're partying.
Yeah. I was I was on a high, right? I was like, that was a lot of fun. Now we're going to talk about some vampire stuff, and we're going to do this podcast. And at this point, I was like, I'm 6 beers in, well, it's all right. You know, I had a little buzz on. So like you get the little buzz on and you get invigorated and you're like, all right, well, this is how it is now. So we sit down and start doing that podcast. Well, we only recorded a 45-minute podcast with the Jackalope LARP folks, but I drank the rest of those beers in that 45 minutes. And so we get done and...
So you had 8 beers in 2.5, 3 hours?
Yeah, give or take.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
You know, there were 18 beers in the case.
You're right. That means that other people had 10.
Okay. All right. Just filling you in on that math.
So
proceed.
Other people had 10. So everybody gets done and they leave. And I don't, to the beer's credit, I don't really remember what we talked about. So I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to that podcast before I edit it and put it out. But everybody leaves. So I'm left by myself and I'm like, oh shit, I'm drunk. Like I wasn't buzzed anymore. I was like, I'm fucking drunk. I haven't had a beer in a year. So I need to sober up and fast, right? So they left some pizza there, and I haven't had pizza really in quite a while. I had some pizza at my brother's wedding, and but I was very like, I'll have 4 pieces of pizza, little squares, and I was very mindful of what I was eating. I was fucking trashed. And I was like, I got to sober up to go to a LARP. So I just start cramming pizza down my face. Because I'm like...
Because that's how your liver works.
Right, because I'm like, I need to soak up the beer, right? I got to sponge it up.
So I go to take Bob. I'm like, okay, Bob, I'll drop you off at Will Call. You can grab your stuff, and I'll come back and get Nate. And then we'll meet you guys at the LARP. I come back, and Nate's like... I'm drunk and I just ate half a pizza. And I was like, okay, well, let's load up the car and walk around a little bit. Maybe get you some coffee.
Right. So, yeah. So we get there and I don't know if this is universal for everybody, but when I sober up, that usually means get really tired.
Yes.
So we get to this LARP and, we park and we have to walk from the parking lot to the convention center, and the reserves had been tapped. Like, that was it. I get there, and I'm just like, I'm going to drink a bunch of water. I'm going to sit down, do some role-playing, and we'll get going. Like, 2 hours in, I'm like, I'm going to fall asleep. Like, this is not going to work out for me. But, that's because I'm an idiot and don't understand how alcohol works. So, yeah.
At least I know the backstory for why you were sitting over there that whole time. For the whole time I was thinking like, man, this Nate just doesn't seem like he's having a good time. I gotta find out what's going on. He's like, no, I'm just
no. I just had too much of a good time.
Yeah, it's all the carbs.
The other incident, Collin, it was on the first night. I remember being like, okay, I got to play this character. I've prepped for a couple of weeks. Did a little research. It's good. I'm gonna land it. I'm gonna land this character. For the most part, I think I did.
Yeah.
However, in mid-showmanship, doing a scene where I deliberately have a character where his job is to talk and misdirect the entire time. Like, if you take a breath in the middle of talking to him, he will steal that breath to talk. I passed the fuck out.
You fell asleep?
I fell right asleep. Fell asleep and almost out the chair. It was bad. It was like I was talking, my brain went careening to the edge, and they were like, hey, you okay? And I was like, it must be the air. I have to stand up. I was like, oh, Jesus. I was like, oh, don't worry, post is it's earlier than others. Like, it needs to be.
No, I had a great time, and I really liked my character. I had a lot of fun. I was also tired on Thursday, but for non-alcohol related reasons. It's just because I'm a delicate rose and I get sleepy and wilty in the heat. But anyway, yeah, I had a ton of fun, and I hope I wasn't too intense with my character.
No.
I like to play.
You were great. I was sitting in one of those scenes where you just showed up and started shouting profanities at a Giovanni, and I was, this is great. I can't tell if this is happening right now or not, but even if it's not, if it is, I don't care. This is great. I'd like her to continue, so honestly.
What happened was Bob's character, who's just like liar extraordinaire, told my character, like, oh yeah, your sire's dead and I killed her. I'm gonna be honest with you about that. I'm not, and just like lie after lie after lie after lie. And I thought about it and I'm like, all right, my character's smart enough to know he's a liar, but she's just pissed off and frustrated enough to kind of not really care with whether he's telling the truth or not. She's just angry and frustrated. So I like walk by you guys, Collin, you were running a scene and there's Giovanni there and there was like another character there. And the Giovanni said something, but nothing like bad, just like kind of off the cuff. And I was like, "Oh yeah, you want to step? I'll come after you, Giovanni motherfucker. You want to meet me outside? You got something to say? You got something to say? Come at me." And I was like, "Okay, calm down, Rachel. You're playing a Nosferatu, not a Bruja." And
quelled the room.
So I was like, but my character was really like frustrated and really like upset. So I figured it was like within character, and she was like trying to get away from everyone to like sort stuff. So I felt like it was within theme. It wasn't just me trying to like be a bitch.
Absolutely. You walked away from that scene, and my fiance was in the other. One of the other characters in the scene, so she's like, "Who is that? She is my favorite person here. Do you know her? Can we get?" I was like, "Yeah, no, we meet her later."
So day one was crazy. It was very tiring, and trying to like cram everything that we wanted to do into one day. We go home, look at the step counter. We've walked 10 miles that day.
I walked 10 miles.
It was ridiculous. So we go home and we get some very much needed sleep. That's the end of the day for us.
And then we had to be up early the next day because Nate and Bob and some of the boys from the Discord and myself were all able to get tickets to one of the V5 games, which was so fun. Oh my God.
It was amazing.
The Storyteller, I wish I wrote down his name. He was amazing. Like, he was so good. I don't know. I don't have anything else to say, but it was incredibly fun. Obviously, the game is really good. You guys read the book, and I've had a chance to read bits and pieces of it since Gen Con, and I'll admit a little bit before Gen Con. But I didn't talk about it, so Nate can't get in trouble. But and so obviously the book is good. I think sitting in on a game that was being run for the first time, because I did the alpha last year at Gen Con. I think it was the alpha or the beta. I don't know. Whatever they did demo at Gen Con last year. And it was good. But we had the opportunity to really see how a lot of the mechanics worked. So fun. And the Storyteller just took it to the next level.
Yeah.
Like, it was probably my favorite thing I did at Gen Con was that. Yeah.
I'm envious. My curse at Gen Con is no matter what game I ever sign up for in tabletop, the Storyteller is always shitty as hell. Like, every time it's terrible.
Yeah,
I also had that experience this weekend too.
We were after later on Friday, we were kind of like walking around, and Rachel really wanted to get into a Star Trek game. Like, we picked up the new Star Trek Adventures game, and she, Rachel has stated plainly she's a fan of Star Trek. I want to learn. So anyways, she was like, all right, let's go look for a game, and if I can get in with generics, I'll play, and then you can go to Collin's LARP, and we'll just meet up when it's all said and done. I said, all right, cool. Something you want to do. And, this was the first time I had ever gone to a Gen Con where the LARP wasn't necessarily like, I don't do anything else but the LARP. Every time I've ever gone to Gen Con, and this is no offense to you, Collin, but every time I've gone to Gen Con, it's I'm going to LARP Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I don't give a fuck about anything else. And this year I was like, well, I want to explore the convention, maybe play some games, like do some other stuff. But either way, I was like, I'll walk with you. We'll see if you can get in. And if you can, awesome, I'll go to the LARP. And if you can't, or, if you can't, we'll just both go. So anyways, we go. And of course, we sit down, and I'm just waiting, and we're like 15 minutes early for this game. And if you've ever gone to the convention and tried to get into a game with generics, it's basically you wait and see. And if all the players don't show up, then they'll let you in with your generic. So we basically have to wait here for 15, 20 minutes to even find out if everybody shows up.
But there must be something about Star Trek Adventures, because it's the same system as Conan. So there must be something about Star Trek Adventures that doesn't just appeal to Trekkies, because from what I heard from word of mouth, every game was sold out. Obviously, most games usually are at Gen Con. And there was there were 3 people ahead of me waiting to use their generics that got there before we did just to try and get in on this game. And those people had also tried to get into other tabletops of Star Trek Adventures that weekend and couldn't get in because everybody showed up. And like, if you've ever done a tabletop RPG at Gen Con, usually like people will buy too many tickets and they'll overbook themselves. They'll get tired. They won't come, or they'll find another event they want to go to. You know, maybe they ate too much or drank too much the night before. They're not feeling up for it. So usually there's always like one, maybe at least one open spot. Not at Star Trek Adventures. Like the guy showed up early. Like there was a couple ahead of me, and then everyone showed up except for one player. And they're like, well, we don't want to play separately. We want to play together. So if the guy comes, you can play. I was like, okay. And then I guess Gen Con staff told all of the game masters this year that don't let anyone use generics if you still have people who have waited to show up. Give people till 15 after to show up to play the game, which I think is fair, but because it's such a huge convention, because if you're running from one side of it to the other, that's going to take a long time to walk, right?
For sure.
Homeboy shows up at 5 till game starts. So I'm like, oh. So it was really disappointing, but even the Sunday afternoon game was completely sold out. So that's how badly people wanted to play Star Trek Adventures.
Yeah. So anyways, we go to the game and we're sitting there waiting, and she's talking with people about a thing she nerds out about. I don't know shit about it. So I'm just kind of sitting there, and I pop open the V5 and I'm looking through it, and we have the advantage because we've already read it. And one of the guys is like, oh, what do you think about it? And I'm like, well, I already read it. I really enjoy it. Here's what I like about it. And, we got to play this morning, and I had a really good time. And he's like, oh, did you? Like, we played in a game this morning, too, at 10 a.m. And I'm like, oh, shit. Like, these people were in the same room as us, just at a different table. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like, what did you think? And he's like, well, we had a really bad experience. And I'm like, oh, well, how come? And so he tells me that, the guy that wrote the encounter was at the table with us. And I'm like, that sounds like it would be awesome to have the guy who wrote it, like, playing with you. And he's like, no. He kept, like, redirecting us and kept, like, not letting us do things. And, we just, like, it was, like, basically his show, and we were just kind of, like, sitting there, and we couldn't get anything accomplished. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. And he's like, yeah, plus the storyteller, like, didn't know the rules very well, and just like kind of had all these issues, and so like we just had a really bad experience. And I'm like, oh, that sucks, because we got super lucky because our storyteller was like really super informative, but we had a storyteller who was like, his keel was super even, right? So he and correct me if you experienced something different, but he knew the rules really well, like, and could talk to like the nuances of them, but also was really super willing to let you explore in any way that you wanted to.
He was big on that, and at the same time, I would say I'll let that be the positive. The downside was being able to see what he had that wasn't on the ball. Mm-hmm. But what I like about it is we were also a sleeper group. We were ringers. Right. We had read the book already. We were sitting there with that. We had a solid group that knew our kind of methodology to get along. And that's what made it. And that's the lesson I want to, give to everybody from that experience, that it's all right he didn't know it back to front. It's kind of on you to go with the flow.
Right.
A little bit. Right. And but we did that, right? We sat there, did the whole prep work, the whole nine, and I enjoyed it. I also know he liked the fact that we had books at table.
Right.
Right. There's people, you guys were opening them up, checking them out. We were sharing it back and forth. And I think he was under the impression we didn't know each other. Right. That only became apparent. So, like, he knew you and Rachel were together.
Right.
Because, the conversation. But I think it's because Mike and Pei and I were still dead tired.
Right.
Like, we were like the one point I found where he kind of caught on was the vampire vial that got put at the table. And I immediately grabbed it and thought it was something you could drink. Like it was like it was a shot of energy.
Isn't it supposed to be?
I was so damn tired. I was like, I need sugar. I need something. And I grabbed it. It was like, oh, sweet elixir.
It was just straight up corn syrup.
Right. It was nothing. I couldn't even get it out, Rachel. It was like fucking, it's just on the lip. And Nick's like, no, don't eat it. It's toxic. And Nate's like, it's not toxic. He's like, well, don't eat it. It's toxic. I'm like, what am I, a toddler?
It's fake blood. Don't eat it.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, White Wolf at their booth where they're selling, the book, obviously, they were also giving out free little vials of Vitae, which was, fake blood.
Swag.
Yeah, a little swag. But
pins and blood and cards.
Yeah, I only have positive things to say about that Storyteller, and the reason being is because of my favorite, most memorable thing. So just to describe the Storyteller, and this may not translate well onto the podcast, but I don't give a fuck because it still makes me laugh. He was white guy, I'd say mid-40s, bald, glasses. Looks like your typical gamer dad.
Yeah, if you're listening, sorry we don't remember your name.
Yeah, but you are. Cool. I want to be best friends with you because you're so fun. But anyway, he there was this character, this NPC he was playing. I'm sorry, SPC. He was playing, and Bob's character was posing as a doctor and trying to go into the prison to do a psych evaluation of this character, and the SPC that the Storyteller was playing was really, really dumb.
His name is Ian.
Ian?
Ian, the
character.
Right, the character.
The character's
Ian.
name was Ian, and he was just a really dumb, either jockey or like a dumb stoner guy. And his character had gotten into some trouble. Ian was a ghoul and had kind of done something to fuck over his sire, and so we were supposed to go find Ian and find all these things that Ian could have leaked to the Inquisition or something like that. So we roll up in there, Bob's interviewing him, and the Storyteller goes, I know that this looks really bad, but it's not. Or or something to that effect. And Bob goes, I see you. Everything you're saying makes perfect sense. And the Storyteller goes, well, to most people, they would know that what he just said doesn't make any sense at all. But Ian's so dumb that what you say to him, this is his response. So Bob says to him, yeah, what you're saying makes perfect sense. And this Storyteller, without missing a beat, makes a facial expression that just conjured up a 14-year-old Valley girl and just goes, yeah. And the way he looked and the way he said it was just I know this looks really bad, but it's not. Bob, what you're saying makes perfect sense. Yeah. It was so funny. I laughed so hard that I clapped and started just cackling at the table. I looked so crazy. It was just his facial expression was so good. And every character that he had the opportunity where he had to emote that across, he did such a good job. So this is a person that has obviously played Vampire a long time, but probably story told and played a lot of games where he really probably encourages players to role play at the table.
So I know that he is a member of the Wrecking Crew, which is a group that handles a lot of that stuff for White Wolf. But again, I don't remember his name. The one thing that I do want to point out, though, and it's kind of an apology, that maybe nobody else even realized should have been given. So we sat down at the table, right? And it was all of the people that we knew. And there was one young lady who was by herself. And I don't think she'd ever played before, right? And we got 6 tickets to a 6-table game. And Chris walks in, DJ. And he's like, and we're like, hey, would you mind, we're trying to give her the hint, hey, this is a person we know, and we don't know you, and
there were 2 other games, so there were 2 other 6-person tables, so it's not like we were kicking her out of the game. It was just can our friends sit, can we all sit together? Right. But no one, I guess you guys didn't. I didn't. None of this occurred to me.
Right. No, it occurred to me because I watched her, and she was she kind of did one of those she got really comfortable with the fact that she was going to get to play with people who knew the game to some degree. And then we were like, can you bounce because we have a friend that's coming? And she did. And she didn't say anything, but she did it with that, it left me with the feeling that she was pissed. She was not happy about it. But
none of you guys asked her though. I was like, hey, I hate to be this person, but would you mind if our friend joined us and you went to another table? I didn't even occur to me that was a weird request to make.
I don't necessarily think it was rude. I just think it was a matter of, she didn't know what's going on.
Right.
The organization is one thing I'll say that I didn't like.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there were 6 people to a table and you knew they were coming, if you leave it open ended like that, Don't just let us go sit willy nilly. Be like, okay, you three here, and that's it.
And that
to
was
avoid.
Yeah, and to your credit, the organization on a whole, as far as like how it was organized, was kind of poor because our tickets told us we needed to be at like 2:45, right? And so we get there, and there's a White Wolf sign in front of 2:43, and there's a Cthulhu sign in front of 2:45, and so we're kind of like, well, where are we supposed to go? And we had to go ask, like, hey, is this the right room? And, you know, of course, like, we could see the sign, but, like, the fact that they seem to have arbitrarily changed it, apropos of nothing, I was kind of like, well, that's ridiculous. And then...
And I don't think, but to jump in, I don't think that that's necessarily the Wrecking Crew's or White Wolf's fault. That's probably, like, if you backtrack it, that's probably, like, Gen Con kind of not organizing things super well. Because what I will say is probably the Wrecking Crew could have done better is, like, policing people a little bit more that were playing the game the day before who wrote all over the fucking sheets.
Yeah.
So that was, like, the one annoying thing to me is that we got character sheets that had already been, like, you know, whatever.
But they gave us the option to write our disciplines to, like, kind of adjust them as we saw fit and kind of, like, customize our characters. The problem was, like Rachel had said, the crew that played before, the day before, they wrote all over the sheets, and some of them in pen. But either way, if they were in pencil, we had to fucking erase them. And, you know, I was just like, well, that's kind of, like, annoying. You know, it's like we're taking valuable time doing that.
At that table, my hat was off to that storyteller because I did everything I deliberately could because I rarely get to play a Malkavian.
Yeah.
And he gave me that Malkavian, and I was like, what's the addiction? Homicide. This is happening.
Right.
This is happening. And then I'm reading, and it's like, you are a special, special boy. I'm already hooked. You know? And it goes through how mom always excuses you from the worst behavior. You begrudged mom for it until eventually something happened. You were always there, but they never caught you for what you did, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, perfect. And I found this creepy guy who just looked like an everyday guy, you know, like maybe a dad-like figure, but was a fan of the Mr. Rogers vest and the shirt, which is where I hold that thought. And what Rachel's talking about, I get into this room with this Ian guy, and I'm like, here's where I prove to this storyteller, welcome to the world of darkness. It's on right now. He's happy. He's funny. I get that. How does he handle a curveball? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, fine. I'm going to strip naked in the hallway. Already, right? That's one. It's like you get nude as a character and it's not in the right environment and people are already like, what the fuck? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get naked right here. Wrap clothing around my eyes and face to try to mask who I am. And as I'm undressing, I'm going to sing the Mr. Rogers theme song, you know? It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. And I tell him that. But he looks at me with the eyes of a fanatic. Like, he literally put me off his torture. It's like, yes, that's going to happen. That's going to happen. And I was like, and I'm going to go in. And he's talking over, you're going to go in. And that's awesome. Except Ian goes, oh, God, I know what's happening. Fine, let's just get it.
He
I was
starts
like,
unbuttoning his clothing.
Yeah.
Right. He's trying to dress too, and he's changed to a table. I was like, that's okay. I know the game salesman. He rolled right with it. Mm-hmm. And then the epic, right? I mean, obviously killed the guy, whatever, but that was to a point, and you really have to be there for it to be entertaining, but that part was hysterical.
Yeah, Ian didn't.
Those two. But then it was, I don't know how they got together. It was Nick and Mike, right? Rachel, Nate, and I turned into the goddamn devil. Because there's this scene where Mike gets a chance to Diab someone, like, which is basically, for those who don't know, to eat a vampire who can't defend themselves and devour their soul and gain power.
Right.
And Mike's sitting there and he's like, how do I get rid of the body and kill it? And Nate's sitting there, he's like, well, you could just not, you could just do that, but it is Gen Con. And I'm like, yeah, man, YOLO. It is Gen Con. Rachel's like, fuck that, bro. Eat that body. Eat that body. You eat that body. I'm like, you got to eat the body now. It's Rachel's tab for it. Mike, what you going to do? Eat the body, Mike? And Nick's like, or don't, because I'm hiding. And what if it doesn't work? And Mike's like, I'm going to eat the body. I was like, it's like Bryce is right. Diab the body. He starts draining his body, and there's a special rule system for it. And Mike's got hot hands at a dice game. He just can't miss. He's just getting it all. And the whole time, Nick's like, fucking guy, how am I going to stop him? He's like, I'm going to hit him in the head with a club.
It was like the most impotent thing he could have done.
Right. He's like, thud. Mike doesn't notice, just doesn't do anything really.
I'm gonna like hit a gangrel who's like committing diablerie in the back of the head with a pipe.
Well, and to Nick's credit, like he rolls all these successes, and there's like this giant number, almost double digits worth of damage. And then we go through how damage actually functions and how it affects a vampire. And the gangrel's like, 1 bashing. And Nick's like, what? That's all I did? And we're like, yeah, welcome to being a fucking vampire. You hit that guy with a club. Didn't do shit. And
Mike goes, I do have that fortitude. You know, that new shit? So, like, what you did, most of it's nothing. So, yeah, sorry.
Right.
It's eating, bro.
And so Nick's, Mike is like, well, you know, like, should I stop and, like, fight him? And we're like, if you stop, you can't go back. Like, once you start down this path, there is no going back. So we're over here. We're like the devils on his shoulder.
And Nate doesn't get out of it. He literally throws in that fucking line for that song. He's like, Mike, you can't go home again. just says it. Like, he's middle eating his soul. And when it's done, the storyteller's like with us. He's like, oh, Diab's kind of interesting. It's a gamble, because if you win, you get a lot of XP that goes to disciplines and whatever. That's fine. But if you lose, your soul is forfeit. like it's just done. And Mike's like, fuck it, we're doing it. And then we're awake. Everybody at the table's awake, because now Mike and Nick got to throw down. Nick doesn't think he's going to have to. What he doesn't know is Mike's already turning to kill him. And a storyteller, like a master, is like, and we're done.
Yeah, and that's 4 hours.
Right. So yeah, it was a great experience for us. You know, I felt bad afterwards because those other players who, to their credit, they hadn't read they hadn't played since like first ed. They had a really bad experience. So of course I'm like advocating for them, like, hey, we had a really good time. Give it a second chance. You know, go get your book, go read it, because the experience you had with the guy who apparently wrote the encounter is not indicative of the experience we had. And
right.
You know, granted, it was partially because we're experienced players, but we didn't have a jerk for a storyteller. So we had a really good experience. Then we go to the LARP, where I'm going to throw it back to Collin. So, Collin, tell us about night 2 of your distinct adventure being a storyteller.
So there's this thing when you run a LARP that you kind of forget about until it suddenly starts happening. When you sit down and run, and I run a lot of games through the year, tabletop games and stuff like that, and I'm on the ball all the time. I know what's happening scene to scene to scene, even if players go off and have their own conversation or something. If they're going to run anything too crazy, I know about it. That's tabletop. And you get to a LARP, sometimes you forget that you know almost nothing that is going on ever. Somebody comes up to me and is like, all right, so this is happening right now. I'm like, wait, I'm sorry, what? Who stole someone's soul? How did that even happen? Who's got that? Does he have that ability? I did not give him that ability. Who gave him that ability? Like, I'm running around trying to put together pieces of what the night is. And I wrote the plot. I know what the big major notes are. But I have no idea how they've gone to resolve themselves. Suddenly, Bob's tapping me on the shoulder. Hey, I'm going out to chum the water. I'm hunting for a shark. I'm sorry, what are you doing? yeah, my gangrel pal, he's going to be in the shark cage. He's going to what? He's looking for an honorable opponent. He's going to fight a Rokea in a shark cage in the water at night. Is that what's good? All right, no, I don't care what scene I'm running. I'm doing this scene now. This is the scene I'm doing now. I want to go and see how this happens. That's how the entire night is when you are running a LARP, because the players get up to insane nonsense, and they only occasionally tap you on the shoulder. Hey, so we're going to be bombing this building now. Which building? Where are you? What's happening? and you just got to run with it, and that's... it is such a confusing experience for me in a lot of ways. It's exciting because everybody seems to be having a really good time, but I don't know what they're having a good time about. I have to wait until after the game is done and gather storytellers like, hey, excuse me, so how much of the plot actually happened, and what on earth was that about what was going down with the shroud and stuff like that? What was happening in that scene that was happening in the corner that could have never get over to?
Right. Well, I can tell you, we show back up and everybody's playing, everybody's having a great time. Like, you can tell people are engaged. And Rachel and I, again, at least for me, I'm done. Like, I've got nothing left in the well. We've walked another 8 miles today, and I'm just fucking toast. However, I wanted to watch, and I observed some things, most of which I will tell you offline. However, what I did see was most people are having a blast right there, and I've never really had the opportunity to go to a Gen Con LARP and just sit and watch. And I'm just watching, like, it's so much chaos controlled only by the vaguest agreement that it's controlled, right? People are like, just imagination is unfolding. But anyways, I'm just chilling, I'm waiting, and we get done with the LARP, and we're like, let's go. I don't know what hotel we went to, but like, let's go hang out and let's play.
The Conrad.
Right, the Conrad, which is oddly apropos. We went to the Conrad after the con. So we decide we're going to sit down and we're going to learn how to play Prince's Gambit. And that was a surprisingly interesting and fun game. We had not played it before. And Prince's Gambit is like a casual role-playing card game based on Vampire the Masquerade. I don't know if you guys have ever played Vampire the Masquerade.
I forgot about that.
But I don't know if you saw that.
Vampire the Masquerade.
Oh my god, I'm just looking at this now. This is fantastic.
How many of those, thousands of those, do you think exist?
Thousands of them.
I
Yeah.
want
Looking at a massive misprint.
Yeah. Anyways,
I want one. I want one so bad now.
So, as a person who was diagnosed with severe dyslexia in 2nd grade, I can say whoever did that probably feels really shitty. But just if you're listening to my voice, don't. Because you have delighted thousands of people with your mistake, my friend.
I want it because of that mistake.
Right.
That's why I want it.
right. So we sit down and we learn how to play this game. And the cool thing about this game is we sat down and basically the instructions take you step by step through playing a round of the game. And as soon as that round was over, everybody knew how to play the game. Like, that's literally all it took. Like, we talked about playing Vampire the Eternal Struggle, and that's like a card game that we all enjoy. That's involved, right? You need to play out an entire game of that, and you're still going to be like, I only vaguely understand what happened. You got to play it a bunch of times to get it. It's like Magic the Gathering, right? You can't just sit down and play Magic.
And the fact that we all learned it and we were all like 100% exhausted is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Nate told me afterwards, like, I think you learned something new about me. He's like, I learned something new about you. And you started off telling me with a compliment. You're like, when you are well rested and you are well fed, you are an excellent teacher. But I forget what you said after that, but it was less complimentary.
Right, but I was like, make you more hungry or more tired than you normally are, and patience goes out the window. Because like she's like, all right, what happens next? And like grabbing cards out of my hand, and I'm like, okay, hold on. We're all trying to learn.
And I was like, no, I need to learn this now. Why are we dicking around? Like, let's go.
So anyways, I'm like, okay, I need to learn how to deal with Rachel when she's exhausted, and Rachel when she's exhausted is not nearly as nice as Rachel well rested. So, all right, let's just get into it. So we get into it, and we learned a very valuable lesson. And that lesson is that it's really easy for the Sabbat to win.
Yeah.
Yes. Especially if the people playing the Camarilla are not
Right.
They're not trying really to throw it. And then when we knew the game, it was getting that strategy down.
Yep.
Yeah.
When you're Camarilla. And it was really bad when pretty much if Rachel was Sabbat, which you were pretty much Sabbat like all those games, weren't you?
I think the second game I was, the first game I wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
And see, that's my fault because I wasn't Sabbat the first game. Mm-hmm. I thought she was.
Right.
So if that puts it in perspective, it's designed to kind of give that you're not certain.
Yeah.
And we were playing with the Italians, and that's what I got to say is those two. If there's a way to game a game and find the trick,
Tony and Pat.
It's Pat
Tony,
and Joe.
I'm sorry, one of those people wasn't even there.
Right, it's Pat and Joe, and they figured it out. The problem is that because Pat and Joe figured it out, that was the downfall for the Camarilla. Because pretty much once you caught on that when Pat called it out the first game of who was what, you knew Pat was telling the truth every time.
Right. Well, I'm Camarilla, the second game, and I'm just like feeding him fucking prestige points because I'm like, he's Camarilla. He's the guy who had the princess favor at the beginning. We know that this corner of the room, we're all Camarilla, right? No, fucking the whole time Pat was Sabat. Pat had princess favor the whole time, which means he's in charge of picking who plays essentially. And yeah, I played the Bruja, and I was the most transparent. But because I was so transparent, everybody's like, he's fucking Sabat.
Right.
He's the loudest one. He's a Sabat. And I'm like, I learned a very valuable lesson. I learned why the Bruja constantly get fucked. They're too earnest.
This is true.
Yeah.
This is true. The cool effect that the Conrad did, I thought was hysterical. Inevitably, bathrooms happen, and I'm like, I'm going to go use one. I go wandering down the hall to the meeting room, and I go in to the most creepy and scary bathroom I've ever been to. Not because it was disgusting or anything. It was incredibly immaculate. It was the fact that you have your typical urinals. That's not a problem. But right behind there, it looks like it's a solid wall, a wood-grained wall with finished material. I'm like, all right, what if I had to poop? What if indeed I had to do that? And indeed that was my business that evening. I was like, well, where's this? I push in the door, and it's like I found a secret wall. And you're in there with plenty of room, and then you shut it, and it's like a coffin. No light can get in here.
Like the door goes all the way to the floor?
All the way to the floor, and you're sealed in. And I'm like, oh, they did this because if you have a meeting and you had to change or whatever, you also these double as changing rooms. That's
right.
okay.
Or also so like your higher ups or lessers don't hear you poop.
Right. Well, and then it's like, the gentle music is playing. I'm like, whatever, I'm here. I hear the door open, and I deliberately make the least amount of noise possible. Because I want to see if the poor bastard who has to piss right now knows that this is not a wall back here. Right? And so I'm sitting here, and I'm just waiting, and you hear it. He gets his flow going, and I just pick up my feet and stomp down as hard as I can, and I hear, like that. You can't do that. You can't do that. I was sitting here laughing. And then the guy leaves, and then one of our crew, I'm pretty sure it's one of our crew, came in, and I'm done. We enter our business, we walk out. I can't stop laughing, right? Because I'm like trying to spot the guy who had a heart attack because he didn't know about the secret poop wall. And
the secret pooper.
Oh, we haven't told you. Speaking of the bathroom, the restroom habits of the convention.
Aside from Nate and I having opposing gastrointestinal issues all weekend because we went off of our like very healthy, strict diet to like drink 8 beers and have all the cookies, that was fun. It wouldn't be Gen Con without like a little bit of a toilet story.
Yes,
but I think what you're getting towards, is the creepy pee-pee underpass.
Yeah, you know,
yeah.
Creepy pee-pee underpass.
Leading up to it.
It's not a Gen Con unless there's some sort of public restroom story, something that will take us off into the future. So we're special, and I'll tell you why we're special. Rachel works at a place that's very close to the convention center. So we got essentially the free parking ticket, which is awesome because for a lot of people, even people that live in Indy, they have to pay for parking regardless, so that makes it difficult, or you've got to take a Lyft or an Uber or something.
Yeah. The only bad part is we still had to walk quite a way. That's why we walked 10 miles, but we didn't have to pay for parking.
Yeah, we didn't have to pay for parking, and we didn't have to walk to a hotel. We just walked to a car and drove home. So in a lot of ways, Indianapolis has gone to great lengths to both address their homeless issue, but also, I would say, hide the homelessness from the general public at large who attends the convention.
That's fair.
And what I mean is that for the most part, they, from what I understand, they like literally move the homeless people from downtown. And there isn't a lot there to begin with because the homeless people, they kind of try to come out. Like in early days of the convention, all of the homeless people would sort of congregate in downtown. There isn't really a lot there normally. However, there are still some places that are like in like the stages of disrepair where like they haven't gotten to like update them. And one of those places is an underpass that separates where we were parking from sort of like the nicer areas towards the convention center. And we walked through there without much of an issue a couple of times. And when we were down there for PopCon, we walked through there.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's a place where some homeless folks sleep and like kind of make their home. And it's one of those rare few places that you might go. And we walked through there on our way to the convention center in the morning. And in August, in like the heat of the morning, it kind of has a very disturbing, disgusting smell, very much akin to a zoo. And so you can tell it's a place where people use to piss and shit, for lack of a better term. Ow. No big deal, whatever, it's gross, but, it's the fact of life. No big deal. So we go to the convention center, we get our book, we come back, and we're on our way to the meetup, and we take that same spot. And there is a homeless lady that I think she was asleep when we walked past the first time. She's very much awake and very much active this time. And, we notice her. We don't really say much. It's not, whatever. We just kind of like go about our business.
And she wasn't trying to like solicit us for anything. She was just she was living life. She didn't really want to have anything to do with us either.
But she also didn't mind looking at us and making eye contact and pressing her back up against a concrete pole.
So we walk past her, and we're like exiting the underpass on the sidewalk, right? And then all of a sudden we hear water falling, and I turn around and look because I think that like water's falling through the train track or something, like, and I don't want to get hit on the head. And Nate does the same thing at the exact same moment, and we turn around, and this woman has gotten up, leaning against the concrete pole of the underpass, and she grabs her shorts by the front, but doesn't pull her pants down. She just grabs her shorts, like near the crotch area, and proceeds to pee all over herself with so much force and vigor that it was loud enough that we thought water was falling from the ceiling of the underpass.
I thought that there was like a hose going.
Yeah, it was as if someone took like a 500 milliliter water bottle and poked a very small hole in it and then squeezed it. Like there was that much pressure, and it was so loud. And I turn around to look, and she just like makes eye contact with me as if to say, "What?"
It's a power move. It's a power move.
Yeah, it definitely was.
And then so like it was not only like just gross, but it was also really disturbing because like the mental illness there to just like in the middle of the day lean up against a pillar and pee was uncanny.
Yeah. So we decided at that point we would not walk through the creepy pee-pee underpass.
She successfully marked her territory because we avoided it at all costs for the rest of the con.
Creepy pee-pee underpass is quite the name.
Yeah. It was such a like it invoked such a response that we from that point on for the rest of the weekend we would walk blocks out of our way so that we didn't have to go under there because we were like, if she's willing to just make eye contact and pee at us, like,
what else is she willing to do?
Right. So it was like, that's her space. We don't need to go there.
Yeah, we don't need to go there. We can walk around. Yeah. That was probably like the most least favorite memorable thing that happened.
Yeah. And my one criticism of the convention center is their bathroom situation. I guess you could never have enough, and there were so many people there that awkward gamer lines were forming in the bathrooms, and that was annoying. So
I have to say, in the women's rooms, I had the complete opposite experience, which was weird because usually that is a problem when you go places because, for the most part, women take longer to go to the bathroom because we have to like pull our pants down and sit, and like that adds time, right? And so usually every time I've gone to a convention or something, you have to wait in line to use the stall. And there's only stalls in a women's room, right? But this time, not only, and this has been my experience every Gen Con, not only was it incredibly clean, but I never had to wait. There was always an empty stall. I guess the problem in men's rooms is that there are more urinals than stalls. And so if you prefer to use a stall, you're going to have to wait.
Or if you've got to poop.
You're going to have to wait.
And I think I think a lot of that's to do with their choice of snacks.
That's
Right?
fair.
It's melted cheese
of
and
food
pretzel and bullshit and maybe
And everything at those
Process
food
movement.
trucks. Yeah. I mean, there was one food truck that, well, I mean, a couple of the food trucks had healthier options, but it's like, if you're going to spend $10, do you want the nachos or do you want the quinoa bowl? I want the fucking nachos.
Right, right.
I will say that anybody who is considering coming to Gen Con, if you can get your stuff mailed to you, the will call line is a fresh kind of hell.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, order your stuff before June so you can have it mailed to your house.
Yeah,
Like,
and while you may want to just drive down on Saturday because you think that's a good idea,
it's not a good idea.
let us present you with a cautionary tale. Our friend Chris decided at the last minute he was going to drive down on Saturday and get a badge. And, in the past, that's been a fairly acceptable, on a lark. I'll just go down and enjoy a day.
You could have done that 5 years ago.
Yeah. 3 to 4 years ago, really, before last year.
Yeah. So this year was it was a benefit for me because I got to have a really awesome meal at Harry and Izzy's. But for our friend Chris, it was not a great day. And so we're getting near the time that we want to wrap up. But I want to talk about two other things real quick. Collin, I want to hear about the last day of your LARP. But Rachel, if you could, please tell us real quick. I went and I had a steak lunch with Chris because he couldn't get a badge. But you had your own kind of great entertainment, also vampire related.
Yeah, so I am a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I like my vampires campy, in addition to really dark and disgusting and horrific. So I can swim in both pools. And I liked Vampire the Masquerade before I even knew Buffy was a thing, but I still really like Buffy. I don't have to justify it to you nerds.
Yeah.
Shut up. Stop judging me. Anyway, so a few years ago, I did a Buffy the Vampire Slayer tabletop RPG, and it was just the most fun I'd had at Gen Con at the time. It was just great. It was everything I wanted it to be. I got to play one of my favorite characters from the show, and last year, I wasn't able to get into any. And this year, I was like, I'm going to do it no matter what. So I was able to get a ticket for a Buffy the Vampire Slayer tabletop RPG. Happened on Saturday. It was not a cheap ticket. I'm not going to tell you how much it was because it's embarrassing how much money I spent on this shitty game. It was $14.
Well,
I'll put it that way.
I was going to say
this 1 4-hour game costs more than Collin's one night of Collin's 6-hour LARP, and was a fraction of the amount of fun. And the reason being was, so first of all, I get there at the table, and there's groups of people, there are some people who know each other already. And I think one of the people was friends with the Storyteller. There was a weird open marriage couple that was there. Okay, fine, I'm not judging, but you volunteer that information. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. How do you know that?
Yeah.
Right?
And then there was another couple there. So everyone was of a certain age, I would say, 32 plus, right? There were no kids at that table. And there were some people who were a bit older. Like, for instance, the gentleman who also was a single individual, a single player, like myself, he came to the table and sat down next to me. This guy, smelled of feet. So for the whole entire game, every so often I would just get a waff of feet. And he didn't look like a person who didn't clean himself, but he smelled like a person who didn't wash his feet. So there was that. In addition to that, the Storyteller had a whole story written out, and he had run the game a couple other times that weekend, so he knew what he was doing. However, he wasn't the strongest personality, and by that I mean that if players... So the guy who was sitting next to me who smelled of feet guy, was a bit of a spaz. And he would just constantly be saying things to try and be funny and get a laugh out of the table, and he wasn't really playing his character, and he was making suggestions, and he was talking over the Storyteller, and the Storyteller wasn't really, dealing with it. He wasn't, and he was kind of almost kowtowing to this guy's personality. The spaz's personality was winning out over the Storyteller. Well, eventually the spaz, feet spaz, makes a suggestion for something for two of the other characters to do. So not only is he not really playing his character as it's written, but he's like, oh, you guys should do this, this, and this. And then if you do this, then this will happen. And proceeds to make suggestions that break this guy's game. So within the first 45 minutes of the game, the spaz has taken over the whole dynamic of the table. He's just over the top. He's trying to get attention. He's just like throwing out one-liners and zingers and trying to get people to laugh. And some people are doing it to be polite. Maybe some people think that he's actually funny. I'm sitting there like, I haven't pooped in 2 days, so I'm uncomfortable. Like, I'm not trying to be polite and laugh at this guy's joke. Let's put it this way. Rachel eats a Whole Foods, non-processed carbs diet, and then my ass eats a muffin on Wednesday, and the whole internal physiology just breaks down. Like, I cannot shit anymore. So anyway, I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I want to play Buffy. Let's do this. And I can't poop, and I'm not about your garbage humor. So anyway, the guy makes a suggestion to a couple other players, and he's like, do this. And they're like, okay. They roll fantastically. Like, they have a godlike roll. And the storyteller's like, oh, no. And essentially, within the first 45 minutes, we completed the entire objective of the game. We broke his game. And he tells us that we broke his game.
Yeah.
He straight up tells us, doesn't roll with it, doesn't try to come up with something off the top of his head. And he's like, you guys just did a roll that I wish you hadn't done, and the game's broken. And there's
So
a
he
couple.
shamed you.
Well, he didn't. I don't think he was trying to shame
No,
us, but he just admitted it.
So real quick, just to give you some insight as a storyteller, we actually talked about this in our earlier podcast. I used this as an example. So this indicates to me a couple of things. First and foremost, he's using a motherfucking module at a convention.
Well, I think it was something he came up with.
I like to think that may be the case, unless he was the actual author.
Even if it was a module, he made it himself, maybe.
Right,
I mean,
but
first he'd be the best gauge. I mean, if it seemed like he knew.
Well, he
wrote.
I don't know if he wrote it necessarily, but it was very much in line with a season of Buffy, and he's even said like we're in season 5, so he was following the plot line of like a season of Buffy. But I think what he was doing was deviating from the actual storyline of the show. I don't know if he wrote a module. I don't know if he was following a module.
Yeah.
If he was following a module, the game was overpriced. The game was overpriced anyway, and it was definitely overpriced for how things turned out. But anyway, like. He's like, okay, well, we can like wrap this up. We can do these things here, there. And he's like, well, there's one other side objective that blah, blah, blah. And then so I use my character's occult ability and I say, okay, well, I'm going to do some investigation. I'm going to look through this book, and I roll a dice, and he's like, oh, you found out this, and this information. And I was like, perfect. So I'm like, I know this information. I was like, I'm going to come up with a creative solution to this problem, and we'll see what happens. And so I come up with a creative solution to the problem. The people trying to accomplish that creative solution roll really well. And he's like, okay, well, nobody else has ever thought to do that before. And you just finished the only other side objective of the game. So we can spend the next hour and a half, 2 hours just killing monsters if you guys want. And I was like, I text Nate and I'm like, Nate, come whisper something in my ear. So Nate comes over and he goes, whisper, 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 whisper. And I turn to him, I go, oh, okay, really? Okay. And then he walks away, and I'm like, sorry, guys, my character is just going to be in the library researching stuff the rest of the time. I kind of got to go. And I straight up left that game because I was like, I'm not sitting here constipated, rolling dice next to Stinkyfoot McGee for the next hour and a half, killing monsters in a Buffy game that has just been trashed. I was like, I'm not doing it. I was like, let's go walk the hall. And then, like about an hour later, I had a life-changing poop. And I lived happily ever after. So I like to think that if I had stayed there sitting at that game, I would not have been able to have such a miraculous BM as I did.
Well, going from shit game to not shit game, tell us about the finality, the finale of the third night of your game, Collin.
So the third night of the game is where we kind of changed our tactics a little bit from the second game, from the second night, where these are the events that are going to be happening for the remainder of the night. And all right, storytellers scatter. These are your events. You can go off script if you want to, but these are the things we're absolutely handling. And now the third night of the LARP is an hour shorter than any of the other nights of the LARP, because usually there's so many events that are going on Saturday. It's the last night of Gen Con, so we usually like to let our players get out a little bit early so they can go hit the bars, the many dances, or whatever the hell people do that night.
There was a goth rave.
Yeah, I heard about that. I missed it. Anyways, I kind of feel like I know that I really did a good job in the game when I stood up and announced, all right, this is the end of the game. Thanks everybody for coming out, but you can finish your scenes, and nobody left. Everybody just like looked up to me, like nod, did like a couple of claps, like, all right, well, shut up. Now we're back to our scenes. Like, well, all right then. Fair enough. I guess we'll just continue going until we're done with things. And then a whole bunch of people came back to the Conrad afterwards, but for a little while I got to hang out with Bob and the crew, and we just shot stories back and forth for a while before before we headed back. And there was a lot of people that showed up for that final pizza party, and it felt really good. A lot of people signed up for the Discord. A lot of people were like, we're definitely going to be back next year. A couple of people, random people who I don't even know, have contacted me on Facebook to say, hey, I'd like to be a part of the game now. I'm like, all right, well, that's fun. Cool. Awesome, I guess.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun on Saturday, so I want you to know that. I thought it was a really good game. I'm sure Nate and Bob will have some, tips and pointers that they could share with you from a different perspective as a storyteller. But I really enjoyed the game. And I maybe once a month, once every other month would be privileged if I could play my character on the Discord. This was a lot of fun, so I did enjoy it. I will say, I don't know if I'll do a 3-night LARP again. I don't know if that is for me, but the 2 nights that I was there, I really enjoyed it. So thanks for getting it all
to
together.
put it into perspective.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming.
For the character that I got to play, missing that second night really, I got there on the third night and I was like, all right, where's this guy? And they're like, oh, you didn't hear? He's dead. And I'm like, wait, what? What happened? Yeah, no, he's dead. All right, well, what's going on with this person? Oh, he's going to make himself Prince. Okay. So all the goals I had on the first night have now dramatically shifted. Well, I could do one of two things. I could go, I can't play this character because none of my goals, or I could just, I'll just plant my flag here, and anybody that wants to come and say anything about it, they know where to go.
Nate made himself Baron of San Francisco.
I literally was like, all right, well, so there's me Anarch and Rachel Anarch.
And Rachel was only kind of an Anarch.
Right. And she was like, I kind of only half give a shit. And I was like, well, I guess I'll be the Baron of the ballroom. What am I going to do otherwise?
Baron of the ballroom.
It worked out for you surprisingly well.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Well, I was like, I'm reading this character, and I'm reading some of the conceptual stuff about the character, and I'm like, well, this character's incredibly violent. So I can either do one of two things. I can either just walk around looking for people to punch the shit out of, or I can just literally put out the word that if you want to get the shit punched out of you, you can come here. And so that's what I did.
Weird. Right. Anytime you would love to just run around and punch people.
No, people were like, we got other things to do. We're not worried about the Baron. So, yeah, it was a ton of fun. I will say that my opinion of the entirety of the weekend, all things put together, being what they were, this is probably the best Gen Con I've been to, period. There are maybe the first one I ever went to would be in contention, but I had all the gaffes and guffaws and all, as tired as I was, I think this was overall the best one I've been to.
Yeah, it was sad to see it end.
Yeah, I barely noticed that it had ended. I'm on such sleep deprivation, I barely know what day it is.
Right.
Well, right. I would say that's probably the one reason that you find where that kind of situation can burn people out, because you know this firsthand, you get no rest.
Absolutely not. That's the one. That is the one big downside about running the Gen Con LARP, is that I usually leave Gen Con being like, I feel like I was vaguely at an event that had a lot of exhibits, but I can't remember anything else except for planning literally night after night after night, and then you're so wiped out on Sunday, you just sort of daze your way through the hall.
Yeah.
Yeah, so everyone should take advantage of Collin's hard work and planning. Since you can't have any fun, you should go have all the fun.
That's, yes, at my expense, please.
So cool. Anything that you guys want to add before we wrap this up? Bob?
Yeah, I want to say that it was a fantastic time overall. We did have a good time. And I just want to remind people, plan your ass off. It's never too early. I'd start now.
Yeah.
Not only to go, but to make sure your hotel doesn't get canceled. And any other such nonsense. Just make sure that's set in stone.
Absolutely.
And apparently, what's hot right now is Airbnb. So that's the way to do.
Yeah, I'd say just kind of to piggyback off that, Gen Con did a pretty good job this year. I don't know how well advertised it was, but they had a lot of really nice blog posts on their website of like suggestions and recommendations for first timers. So if you didn't go this year and you've never been before and you want to go next year, definitely check it out a couple months in advance. I would say get your tickets as early as possible. Event registration usually opens in late spring. We're all geeks. So I know there's some like planning, project management geeks out there. So if you're not that person, find that person in your friend group and make them go and make them like, plan stuff with you.
Yeah. Collin, you got something you want to share?
Well, next year, if you're around and you're around Gen Con and you know me, pull me out to do stuff, because otherwise I'm just gonna drift around like a weird phantom ghost mumbling about Mind's Eye Theater and chops.
Collin, you can come to a Buffy tabletop with me.
Please, no, absolutely. Literally pull me into things. The only fun that I had was when my friends were like, oh, right, that guy exists outside of this LARP. You should come and do this event. And I was like, I guess I'm here.
Yeah.
You've spoke and I've wandered. Where am I and what am I doing?
So we're adding you to the collective then.
Yeah.
Yep, perfect. I'm down.
Yeah.
Just note that. No, I don't think you understand the collective. The power of Chris Wong and Rachel was felt.
Yeah.
The planning was real. You will have things to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you will be there.
Good.
We were able to pin down one of the coolest places owned by one of the coolest people in Indy. Our meetup was at Voluta Tattoo, and for those of you who are familiar with our vampire podcast, you probably already know that, but you can't mention it too much, because not only were we given access to this really cool site for what I think is a really bitchin' cause, but then the owner and proprietor of the shop he said, peace, we'll see you in a couple hours, and he left. So it wasn't even like, in a lot of places, someone's going to be watching over you. This man knew we were all adults. We respected his place. We cleaned up. And it was like, honestly, if we'd have done it at like a restaurant or, any other place, like we probably couldn't have done what we did there, which was have a really cool game, play rock, paper, scissors, record a podcast, drink some beers, and then clean up and go home when we were done. So
yeah, it was really cool. And also, if anyone's listening to this and you do tattooing, I don't know, what the future looks like for him in renting out this space, but there's another podcast. I think it's Venture Maidens. I think it's Adventure Maidens or something. I'll have to look it up. But now I feel like shit that I forgot what it was. But anyway, one of the hosts of that podcast is a tattoo artist. And so she wanted to, while she was in Indy for Gen Con, she put it out on social media like, hey, if you're going to be at Gen Con, you're a fan of our podcast, I'll be doing tattoos from 3 to whatever on this day at Voluta Tattoo. So that's like really, really cool, right? So this guy is definitely like not only like invested in his clients and promoting tattooing as an art, but he's also like very excited in the future to maybe do more things with Gen Con attendees. And so if you're a Gen Con person and you're a person who's running a booth, or you work for a company and you're looking for a really cool space to hold maybe like a get together one evening, check out Voluta Tattoo. It's an amazing space and the owners are really good people.
Well, I'm sure we'll have more to talk about down the road, because Gen Con was ridiculous and it was awesome, and there was just so much to experience and see. But we're about out of time. So until next week, I am Nathan.
And I'm Bob.
And we'll talk to you again soon. Hey, folks, this is Nathan from UtilityMuffinLabs.com. If you enjoyed the NerdWords podcast, think about supporting us. For more podcasts, art, videos, and gaming, go to utilitymuffinlabs.com. Follow our podcast on Twitter at Utility Muffins, on Instagram and Facebook under our Utility Muffin Labs name, and support us on YouTube at Utility Muffin Labs. Check out our other gaming-related podcast, 25 Years of Vampire the Masquerade, and check out our Playing Hooky podcast coming soon. Thank you all for your support. Utility Muffin Labs, consistently rated adequate.